Hello and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret, and today I am talking to Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop. Jenny Anderson is an award-winning journalist, author, and speaker with more than 25 years of experience. Her work has appeared in some of the world's leading publications, including the New York Times, where she was on staff for 10 years. Rebecca Winthrop is a leading global authority on education. She is the director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings and an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Today, we are talking about their new book, The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better, just released. Welcome, Jenny and Rebecca.
Thanks for having us. Oh, wow. We did that in unison.
We've been practicing. We've been practicing.
Next time, harmony, please.
Yes.
So you two have these really interesting bios. How did you find each other to come together to write this book?
Jenny, you want me to start? So I have worked in education for 30 years, and I was perplexed and shocked during COVID when I found that my two boys were not as engaged as I thought they were. I had one in sixth grade, one in third grade, and my sixth grader was the sort of straight A student, loved school, jumped out of bed in the morning, never seemed to work that hard. And the minute school went pass fail and there was not the chance of getting an A, he lost all motivation. And I said, it's online. You still have to learn this stuff. Of course, dagger to the heart. Learning is important. He's gotten this around the dinner table his whole life. And he told me, Mom, it's not counted, so it doesn't matter. And what I realized is he was really into full-on achiever mode, collecting the A's, but not into learning, pretty disengaged in actually learning. And my little one was really struggling in school. He was in third grade. He'd just been diagnosed with dyslexia and was 2 grade levels behind and was not able to keep up, had internalized this idea that he was not smart and had really stopped trying. And I thought he was totally disengaged. But you get a different learning environment where he's not having to keep pace with his peers. He can keep his own pace. Totally motivated, leaned in, was like at it every morning and caught up 2 grade levels. And I just know how important, how engaged kids are in their learning is. And it's very hard to see. And I thought, if I can't see it, how can other parents see it? And I went looking for my most favorite education journalist, Jenny. And I had to have a couple goes before she said yes to me to see if we would write a book. So Jenny, why did you say yes?
After I said no a few times, I said yes. So I had been, Margaret, looking at this. I covered finance for over 15 years, and I loved it, and it was fascinating, and it was hedge funds, private equity, financial crisis. It was just go, go, go. And then I had kids, and I was really interested in how they learn, and I wanted to understand more about sort of education itself. And I'd always had this sort of in the back of my mind, one day I'll be an education reporter. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is my moment. And I looked out and I looked around, and there was a lot of coverage about the politics of education, charter schools or not charter schools, teachers unions, which is important, but there was nothing on kind of the intersection of child development, the science of learning and development, and the education systems we have. And so this idea of like, how do I support my kid to learn better, which was what I wanted to do, I didn't see. And so when Rebecca came along, I started doing this coverage a little bit at a place called Quartz. I left the New York Times and I joined Quartz, and they helped me carve out some of that space. But Rebecca really wanted to kind of elevate it and synthesize it and do something that honestly hadn't really been done, which is synthesize a ton of different motivation literatures around what parents need in the moment that their kid is struggling in school.
Yes. And deep behind the scenes cut for the audience, Jenny's brother married my cousin. So we are practically family.
We are. We've been at a few events together.
Very much a few events together. So let's talk about this concept of engagement. We like to always start by kind of defining the problem, asking, is this a problem? So I understand the word engagement generally, but how are we applying it to, in this case, teenagers?
So how engaged a kid is how they approach their learning in school. It's how they learn versus what they learn. And it has a couple of dimensions. It's what kids do, it's what they feel about school, it's what they think, how they're thinking, and it's what they proactively initiate around improving their learning environment. That is sort of the highest level description of what engagement actually is.
And then, Jenny, walk us through the flip side, which is, of course, disengagement, which the book focuses on.
Yeah, I mean, it is when all of those, when how you act and think and feel contribute to turning you off to learning, to disengaging from learning. So I would just build on what Rebecca said, and to answer your question, I think we've really overlooked the influence of emotions in learning, sort of how kids feel about their learning and in the place of learning and among their peers as a learner. That really has an incredibly important influence on how kids learn and what they learn. And it's not a sort of, nice to have, it is a must have. And that is one of the three pillars that Rebecca just lined up. There's the behavioral, which is how kids act. There's the affective or emotional, that's how they feel about their learning. And then there's the cognitive, which is the thinking piece of it. Are they doing the sort of deep thinking? Are they leaning in when things get hard? Are they thinking about the stuff after the fact or during the fact? And so disengagement is when one or two or all three of those pieces are not working. And so a kid is pulling back from their learning and not leaning in.
And when I see the title of the book, The Disengaged Teen, I mean, an image immediately pops to mind. Is disengagement kind of a natural state for teenagers? I ask as the mother of two teens who sometimes seem, and a burgeoning, a late tween who's about to be a teen. Is disengagement, we sometimes say, a biological imperative? Why do we picture this disengaged teen so easily?
I would say, and Jenny, you should add on, that it is not at all natural, though it is very typical. And it is not natural because actually, as kids, kids are hardwired to learn, as are humans. And there's two massive peaks, early childhood and adolescence. And so when kids enter adolescence, middle school, high school, they are hardwired to explore, to find meaning, to seek out new experiences, to learn new things, to connect to different people, to really start understanding their world. So it's actually an incredible feat, and I say this as an educator, that we managed to overwhelm and bore our kids when they hit adolescence with school, like at the same time. Like if you could design something to sort of squash someone's natural tendencies, this is it. So
it would be the American high school.
Yeah. So it's typical. And everybody says, oh yeah, the Disengaged Teen, which is part of why that was the title, because it's such a gestalt. It's a thing. Movies are made about it. But it's not natural. And it's not really teachers' fault. It's a design problem.
Right.
And I would definitely add to that, by the way, I love that question. That is such a great question. And Rebecca, I actually really like your answer too. But I also think there is from a parent standpoint, you have to put this side by side with the neurobiological changes of teens, which is they are pulling away from us. So they seem less engaged with us. And that's a good point. As it should be. Right. Because they're sort of the developmental challenge of adolescence is to find a mate, pull away from your family, be independent, and sort of leave the nest. And so to do that, part of what Rebecca's talking about being so wired for learning is because they have to go find their new tribe. Like they literally have to scan the savannah and be like, I want you. Like, I want to be part of this. And to do that, they have to contribute something to see what they're worth and who's going to have them. And that's the piece where schools, I think, and as Rebecca said, by design and, not by intent of teachers, fail because they need opportunities to explore who they are in these groups, and kind of be more active in their learning. So, and at no point in this book do we say like they shouldn't learn math. Like, of course they should learn math, and of course they should be in
teen
school.
Would pay a lot for a book that says you don't have to learn math. So that should maybe be something you consider.
We're not the guest for that.
Bummer.
But anyway, so I do think so they do pull away from us. So the disengagement from us is very different from disengagement from learning. And we have been in a lot of schools where kids were teenagers, were very engaged. So we've seen it. We know it exists.
Yeah, and I think it's a useful kind of paradigm shift that the biological imperative is exploration that like we've talked before. This was forever ago, but Shaun White, who's an Olympian snowboarder, he is an interview with his parents, and they said he wouldn't stop basically jumping off the roof of their house. And they tried all these things to get him to stop jumping off the roof. And then finally they just put a bunch of mattresses down because his instinct to explore was so strong that the only solution was mattresses. There was no solution that involved not jumping off the house. But I think sometimes when we look at our teens, we see like, why can't you just sit still and learn and get really engaged in algebra and trigonometry? But it's possible it's the fish trying to ride a bicycle problem, that if we're thinking the biological imperative is sullenness, that's really a symptom of the real biological imperative that's being kind of squashed.
Correct. And when kids say, you hear a lot, I hear it from my kids. I'm sure you hear it from your kids. School's boring. This is boring. This class is boring. What they're really saying, it could be a mix of things, but often what they're really saying is, I have no freedom to pursue what's interesting about this lesson or topic during school hours. And so we have a great line in the book that, you know, boredom is a crisis of agency, rather than the, you know, kid, there's something wrong with the kid.
Yes, the natural state of learning.
Right.
And sometimes they are, and Rebecca, I think you were going to add this, but sometimes they are literally just bored with the content. And that is also like legit. We haven't done a great job of always connecting what's happening in classrooms to the real world. And it's definitely, we'll probably get to this later, but like a lot of the advice is that's the role we can play. But like they know so much more about the world, and what they're doing doesn't feel connected to that. And so there has to just be more of an effort on our part, the part of schools and sort of curriculum design, to connect those two things so it feels worthwhile while they're there.
It's worth clicking on that now, although we don't want to jump ahead to solutions. This idea, that's what I hear so much from my teens right now. Where am I ever going to need this? You know, why do I need to know who fought in the War of 1812 when I want to play guitar in a band? And that disconnection is some of it does feel to me like some of that is just natural delayed gratification. I mean, we can't make every lesson, right? Like, well, actually, I mean, I find myself now as a person who grew up wanting to do comedy and being a comedian, doing a ton of math in my actual job. And so it does seem like that is part of the problem, but is it an inherent part of the problem that you have to just kind of trust us a little bit that some of this is just learning?
Yeah, and it's a point that we make over and over again in the book. Sorry, Rebecca, I didn't mean to cut you off. But at no point are we saying like education should be entertaining, and you should feel really good about what you do all day, every day. Learning is super hard. It will be hard, and it will not be enjoyable all the time. And that is totally fine. If we do too much of that, we're going to lose the kids. So like there just has to be a better balance of having some agency, right? Some kind of architecting of their own lives, so that, by the way, they then have those skills in the future, right? That's where they're feeling unprepared because everything's being done to them and they want to do some stuff. And again, not like choose your own adventure. That is not what we advocate in this book. Like, you know, we believe in schools, we believe in teachers, we believe in expertise, like all of those things, you know, unapologetically in this moment. Let's say that, like, we believe in teachers as experts, pedagogical experts. They know what they're doing, and content experts. And kids still need a little bit more agency in the classroom.
I want to double click on that, Margaret, because, and Jenny alluded to it earlier, part of the problem is that we, in many school systems, in many schools, have low expectations of what kids can do. And so kids are very busy analyzing the trees and miss the forests. So, you know, 8th grade history standards, here's the Declaration of Human Rights after World War II. You know, what does this paragraph mean? Who wrote it? Tell me the components of it, and miss the, hey, what just happened in the world that you think we might need a Declaration of Human Rights?
Right.
Like what, why is this good? So the why question, the big questions, the meaning making questions we often miss. And that is higher order thinking.
Yeah.
And kids love that. So we say you don't need jelly beans and rainbows and sunshine to make a classroom engaging. You need to challenge kids and believe that they can really grasp big topics. And they're often missing a lot of this sort of higher order meaning making, pattern spotting, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, because they're very busy, because a lot of our curriculum standards don't push them enough, sort of putting things in boxes and learning, algorithms.
Right. And missing the excitement of the big question.
Yes. Kids get very excited by big ideas.
Yes, I am talking to Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop. They are the authors of The Disengaged Teen, and we will be right back to talk about the 4 modes of engagement. So the book centers on these 4 modes of engagement. This really lit me up. I was like, oh yes, I know I got, I can put everybody. And it's not really, they're not descriptions of people. They're descriptions of the way that students engage, which I think is very important, because I have a tendency with myself to be like, I'm the resistor. I get it. I'm the resistor. That's how I operate. But kids can operate in different modes depending on the circumstances. So let's go through the 4 modes of engagement, starting with my specialty as when I was in high school, resistor mode.
All right. Resistor mode is the classic quote unquote problem child that teachers think about, and parents, we all know who they are. They may be in class, but talking with their neighbor. They may be the class clown. They may be taking long breaks to go to the restroom to avoid having to listen to the boring lecture. They may start skipping school. They may not do their homework. And then it can get much darker. They may start getting very behind. They may feel bad about themselves. They may stop trying. They may be chronically absent. They may leave school, and they may have a range of mental health problems. So that's sort of the constellation of things that we see. In terms of what's going on inside, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, Margaret, before we turn it over to Jenny to add. Oftentimes kids do not feel they belong. They do not see the relevance of what they're doing, and have any sort of spark in school. And they're very excited about other things outside of school. And oftentimes they have a lot of get up and go and gumption and oomph. And they're really what they are is using their voice to say, this isn't working for me. I need something different. And it comes out inappropriately. Often we have a great quote from a student who said, who was total resistor mode for a long time, and said, I didn't have the words. So it came out in anger. If I'd had the words, I would have said, I need a different learning environment. So that's really what resistor mode is.
And the exciting thing about resistor mode, and I've talked to quite a few parents about this, is those kids, as Rebecca said, have agency. And again, curious if this was your experience, Margaret, but they just need it pointed in the right direction. It's pointed away from learning. If you can get it pointed toward learning, they're in great shape. Because when we get to the other modes, the next 2 modes before we get to explore don't have a lot of agency. They have agency, it's just not being used constructively. So kind of getting it pointed. So, applied.
You have a lot to work with.
You have a lot to work with, because that kid is letting you know, which is, very different from kind of, withdrawing or sort of coasting or just sort of hitting it out of the park, but not really looking too hard at what you're doing. So I'm fast forwarding to the other modes. I shouldn't be doing that.
I, in high school, came from a very high achieving family with 4 kids, 3 of whom were extremely academically gifted and oriented to school. And I was the one who was not. And I think we've talked a lot about defining ourselves in opposition to what's going on in our families. That was a big part of my childhood, I think, was saying, I'm not like these people. I'm different. I'm unique. I'm not going to just walk the line like these boring soldiers. I'm going to be creative and artsy. And that it came out very much as anti-school. School was my place where I could say, I'm not like you people. And I was very kind of obsessed with fairness and, you're judging people by the wrong, shallow standards, and I reject all of your values. That was kind of how I fought my way through high school, and it wasn't pleasant for my parents, I will say. But when I read about Resistor Mode, I was like, oh yes, this seems quite familiar to me.
This feels very familiar.
This seems right.
And Margaret, indeed, Jenny and I would say, you were right in high school. Actually, high school does actually assess kids on a pretty narrow set of competencies and skills. And, IQ, which is a great predictor of how kids do in school, was developed. The IQ test was developed to see which kids are going to do well in school and which aren't. It wasn't developed to be the end all be all of your ability to contribute to society. So it is a very narrow measure that most schools are using, even though you talk to any teacher and they would love to educate, much more broadly to bring every kid's strengths out.
And this brings me to my nemesis in high school, achiever mode people.
AKA your three other siblings.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can take that one. I was the person
if Amy was here, she was full. It's funny because we have all these conversations. She was full achiever mode all the time.
So, I mean, you've probably figured this out, but achiever mode on paper is the one everybody loves, right?
Yes.
Teachers love it. Parents love it. Everybody feels good. These are the kids who get the gold stars. They work really hard. Every hoop you put, they jump through, and they want to figure out how to get higher and further and do it better and satisfy the expectations of whatever system is given to them. And some of that is obviously great. You're developing good learning habits. Achiever mode kids often have excellent sort of study habits and skills, and they do work hard. The problem becomes they are often very fragile.
Right.
They are fragile
I
learners.
love this. I put a big note, fragility, because that's right.
And this was definitely me, by the way. It was like, just as long as I'm getting the gold stars, like keep running. Just don't look down. Don't look over. These kids often aren't asking themselves what they care about, why they're doing what they're doing, where they want to go. So as you get older, the hoops, people aren't putting up hoops for you to jump through. You're having to say, this is the hoop I want to get through, or, navigate your way through college, or turn up to class when you don't have a parent who's yelling at you to get out of bed, or put away the phone because your parent isn't like locking it in a lockbox, right? So it's knowing yourself, having a little bit more self-awareness and confidence to take risks. And so the big thing with achievers is they really do have alarming mental health stats. So whereas most people don't want to mess with the good thing, don't mess with those achievers. They're getting the A's, they're going to get to the good colleges. Like, at what cost? Ask your, and sometimes it's all good. We don't want to sort of say, if your kid is doing well, you've got a problem. Not the message at all. If your kid is doing well and never sleeping and, kind of collapses when the smallest thing doesn't go right, or it's 99 and not 100. Lisa D'Amour has this beautiful line, the difference between a 91 and a 98 is a life. She's still saying get the 91, obviously.
Right.
And we can debate whether that's the right approach. There is just this at what cost, and making sure that kids have, anyways, we'll get to the,
we often say it's not, you don't necessarily need to fix the problem, but just look at it, just examine it. My husband is a super achiever mode guy. And this week he was falling asleep. He'd been on an international flight and was incredibly jet lagged, and he kept falling asleep. No, I'm not tired. I finally said, there's no gold star for not taking a nap. You're not in a competition with people who nap. It's just okay to rest when you're tired.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not that you need to make your achiever a resistor, or you need to change the mode. It's just acknowledging the mode so that everybody has an operating system, and knowing your operating system puts you in much more control of your life. It's not that you need to dismantle every single thing about your kid, but to say like, achiever mode has all these good things, but are we really too stressed? Are we not resting because we have something to prove to an invisible no one who doesn't exist?
Right.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, Margaret, because that's and you sort of alluded to this when you introduced the modes. The modes are not identities, right? The goal, one of the key goals of the book is these are modes. Kids move through them all the time. And sometimes they get stuck in a mode. And when they get stuck in the mode, that's when the mode becomes an identity. And that's the problem. but most of the time it's not a problem. And why we're giving parents this language around the modes is to help them move into the modes. With your husband, you're like, be a passenger.
Exactly.
Just chill and coast a bit. It's okay. Like, we can all, when you're driving, you do not stay in the fast lane the entire time. Right?
I mean, my husband does, but yes, I understand your point, theoretically.
Okay, but traffic comes, you need to weave and dodge, you might need to take a back road. Anyways, you need to, like, the key to a happy life is probably knowing the mode for the moment, right? Like, I can employ passenger mode now. It's exams, it is full-blown achiever mode moment. Like, let's go, game on, right? We can do this, and always finding explorer mode moments. Anyways, we still got one more to go.
Two more.
Sorry.
Let's talk about passenger mode, which you reference, which you call the original quiet quitting, which I really enjoy.
Passenger mode is the kid who's coasting.
Mm-hmm.
They're showing up, they're doing school, and they're attending, and they're turning in their homework. Often they whip through it as fast as they possibly can. They don't put a lot of thought into it. And they might like school to see their friends. They might not be super excited about what they're learning. So a lot of times I think about passenger mode as having dropped out of learning, but still in school. And this is actually, most kids have school experiences that they say sort of inspires passenger mode, kind of meh. And sometimes, as we just talked about achiever mode, sometimes you want kids to be in passenger mode. If you've got a kid who is overstressed, has a bunch of APs. I have my oldest son goes to a pretty intense academic STEM-oriented high school, which he loves. He's a big science buff. He's got like all these AP classes, and I kept saying, why, stop taking all APs, and he can't. It's required. Like, he's just, gone through, there's no other courses to take. So it's like, okay, why don't you try to be a passenger in this course? Because, you can't, kill yourself. You still need to go to bed. I still have a very strict bedtime, even though he's 16, which I maintain, we're digressing, is the key to why he's doing well. So, sometimes it's okay to coast. But what kids are giving up if they get stuck in passenger mode, or they're there most of the time, is they really aren't developing the learning to learn muscles. They're not developing the study habits. They're not developing sort of this intrinsic motivation to go after and proactively seek out things that they're very interested in. And that is very worrisome, especially in an age of AI, when they leave our nest and they're in college or they're in work or whatever. They have got to be self-starters, and they have got to learn to navigate this world that is coming down the pike.
And Jenny, talk a little bit about the zone of proximal development. I love this term.
I love this term so much. So this was a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky invented this term, and it is literally the learning sweet spot. It is when things are not too hard that you give up, or too easy that you are bored to tears. You're in the zone. And it typically means that there's someone who is helping you, someone or something, right? It could be ChatGPT, it could be a video, it could be a teacher that is stretching you beyond your zone of proximal development, but you are in that learning sweet spot. And so a lot of kids end up in passenger mode because they are above or below their ZPD, right? They are overwhelmed, and so they check out, because definitely worse to try than to try and fail. Or they're or it's too easy and they're just bored to tears, and so they check out. And we have a lot of examples of kids in the book who are they're very conscious of why they're making the decisions. I online shop in chemistry because my teachers mean and won't answer my questions.
Right.
I online shop because I did this 2 years ago. I shouldn't have to do it again. This is ridiculous, right? So and it's really hard. I mean, we talk about how hard, a teacher has 30 kids in their class. They're somehow meant to get every single kid into their zone,
into
and somehow
ZPD.
Yeah. Into the ZPD.
No.
It's also, it's the flow state. It's, it has a lot of different terms for it, but ZPD is what teachers use a lot, because they really think and work hard to figure out how to get kids into their ZPD.
We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about explorer mode. So Is it fair to say Explorer mode is the final mode of the book? Is it the optimal mode? Is it the most desirable mode? Or is it just a mode that we want to, it's like the pepper. You need a little bit of it, but, it's not the whole thing.
I would say, and Jenny, you should add in your 2 cents. I would say you absolutely want your kid to have plenty of time in Explorer mode as they grow up, especially when they get into adolescence. And if they are not, they're not going to develop these Explorer muscles, which they will need when they leave to be successful in life. In addition to that, Explorer mode is not sort of navel gazing, sort of doing whatever they want. Kids who are in Explore mode really have this proactivity around their learning. They're initiating things and like, hey, can I study with a friend? Hey, can I look at this YouTube channel to learn about whatever? Hey, can I write my essay on this topic? They're trying their best to make the learning environment really interesting to them. Right. And it makes them super motivated. And when they get the opportunity to be in Explore mode in school, they get the best grades. They get mental health benefits. They're happy because they're interested in enjoying what they're doing. And they develop these resilient learning skills that kids need in an age of AI. It's this trifecta. So we say if kids don't have the opportunity to do this in school, really try to give them the opportunity to get into this Explorer mode outside of school, because it's it doesn't necessarily matter so much the canvas in which they are practicing these skills. It's developing the skills.
And you say that less than 10% of kids feel their school allows for Explorer mode. So that's a very damning statistic.
Yep. Between 3rd and 12th grade. And it gets even worse when you get into middle school and high school. It's less than 5%.
And just to answer your question, to build on Rebecca's answer, the pinnacle isn't really Explorer mode. The pinnacle is knowing the mode for the moment, which is really a self-awareness and a sort of metacognitive awareness of it. But to do that, you have to have the Explorer mode, right? So you're never going to develop that ability to kind of know when to explore and to push and to sort of shape the learning to be your own if you don't have the opportunity to do it. So I think the pinnacle is the awareness to how to move, but that comes from needing to have Explorer moments and actually test that out. Like, you can't have agency without having opportunities to have agency, right? You can't learn to ride a bike without riding a bike. You can't learn to make choices without having opportunities to make choices. And you can't figure out what you like as a learner if you're never given any opportunities to do that.
Right. And we've talked about this a lot with organized sports, organized play, that free play has really disappeared, and that the idea that kids are just always under an adult supervision who's telling them go here next and go here go there next is kind of robbing them of this Explorer mode. And I think about having been a resistor pretty much full-time in high school. I got to college, and I often tell the story. It's like the Blind Melon has this video where this little girl's a bee and everyone's like, you're gross, you're a bee. And then she's walking home really sad one day and she comes across a field of people dressed as bees and they're all dancing. And that's the end of the video. And it's like she found her bees. And that for me was college. Oh, I can decide what to take. I've always been interested in Japan. I'll study Japanese. And the idea of being, now sadly I was sort of lacking some of the skills I needed to explore because I failed Japanese and got kicked out of class. But I think that the idea of, I so relate to Explorer mode as the joy of learning and the joy of really exploring things that high school just drives out of a lot of kids.
Right. Yeah, and really kids does. We found that kids, we interviewed over 100 kids across the country of all demographics. Kids who are in resistor mode, if you changed their learning environment, quickly jumped to Explorer mode.
Right.
And often when you have a kid who's kind of stuck in resistor mode, I mean, one thing is to, have one bad class, but if they're sort of stuck for a while, parents and schools will start taking away their freedom.
Right.
You can't, okay.
No recess for you. What
no
a
recess
goofy
for
idea.
you. No sports teams, no chess club, no science triathlon, no drama club. You can't be in the play. You're behind on your academics, and it shrinks their world and it makes things worse.
Right.
So counterintuitively, a lot of times what kids who are stuck in resistor mode need, which is exactly what you needed, because as evidenced by college, like, is more freedom and more agency and more autonomy to really pursue their interests. And that sort of lifts them up out of this funk. And it often, if you give them that opportunity, it often spills over to other subjects.
It makes sense.
And it's hard for parents to believe that sort of doing this other thing, like that doing pottery is somehow going to make you better at math. And that's not necessarily the case, but the pottery is, we have this beautiful example in the book of a dad who, his daughter had totally disengaged from learning. I mean, really was struggling a lot and started doing pottery, and she was terrible. She was just terrible at pottery. Like, they didn't look like bowls. They didn't look like anything. They were like blobs of clay that dried and then were dry blobs of clay. And, but slowly she got better. And he was kind of like, this is learning. Like, look, It's starting to look like a bowl. And she was like, oh. And he's like, you can do that in school too. Like, you feel really bad at all these things because it's looking like this right now, but you can, he's used it as a visual metaphor.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you see it in clay or you see it on the sports pitch, right? Like, that no kid's born Lionel Messi. They, they're like running around in circles doing cartwheels for the first 3 years, and they're, not paying any attention. And suddenly they develop the skills. All this stuff takes time, and we have to find ways to not get them discouraged. And as Rebecca said, like, really find ways to, when they've got a spark, lean into that spark.
I think that is such a good example, because often when you break it down, the things that we think are very inherent, like learning, you read to a kid and then they learn to read, that they're not as inherent for kids. I had a kid during the pandemic who decided they wanted to figure out how to do a front flip, pretty, gymnastic oriented kid. And just the process of hours a day outside on a mat, just trying it. And I thought, that's the best learning I've ever seen a kid do, is just, I'm by myself in the yard and I'm going to figure this out. And I think so when we talk about explorer mode, because you cite many different styles of learning in the book, resources, which are all useful, but for someone listening and thinking, I can't change schools, I got 3 kids, the solution, how is the solution, I guess, inside our houses already for us and not a big change that we have to make?
So I'll start, Jenny, and you dive in. So I love that example of your daughter or son. Doing the front flip. That is exactly explorer mode. Right. They are leaning in, they're behaviorally engaged, they're excited by it, they're, emotionally engaged, they're thinking through it, they're trying to figure out I don't know, were they watching YouTube videos, trying it again and again, iterating. They're totally not afraid of failure because they fail and get incrementally better each time, and they're not just going to give up. And they're actively helping their environment work for them. Mom, I need a mat. Mom, I'm going to do this. Mom, I can't, wash the dishes right now. Whatever. I'm making this up. So
that definitely didn't come up.
Yeah.
That does come up. Yes.
Yeah. I always have a son who's like, I need to practice piano. I'm like, the minute you have to wash the dishes.
Yes.
So that right there is parents, you supporting your kid to be in explore mode. You didn't say front flips are not worthwhile, do something better with your time. And it could have not been a front flip. It could have been something that you think is really dumb.
Right.
I don't know, trying to do something with Legos that you thought was not worthwhile. So parents go with what your kid is interested in, even if it seems ridiculous. If they are trying to figure it out and it's hard and they're motivated, that is building explore muscles. So you didn't have to do much except for give them the space and not squash it. So that's absolutely one thing to do. There's a whole bunch of other things that we can do just in the contours of our day. You don't need to hire people. You don't need tutors. These are dinner table conversations. These are talking about the content of what we're learning. I'm going to pass to Jenny and she's going to walk through all this. But just to say, it's easy once you start seeing the modes and trying to tailor your support to where each kid is at, and then integrating it into your day. So Jenny, you want to passing the torch to you for more.
And I think I'll start
things.
High level and then come low level. I mean, I think it's believing that kids can change and grow, right? Like their brains are under massive renovations. Like they're just doing this full blown house renovation in adolescence. And so when you see them in a sort of moment, not panicking and thinking like that's the moment forever, like that's them growing and exploring and changing. So like not panicking and leaning into, obviously panic when it's unhealthy or dangerous to themselves or others, but like when it's, making paper airplanes endlessly and you're like, seriously, how is this kid going to get into college? Like, no, that is actually, there's something going on there. And like, just letting that be, creating the space and time for it is actually, it sounds like a passive choice. It's an active choice. It's an active choice to let them do the thing they want to do, even if it doesn't seem to resonate with you in any meaningful way. And then the other two that I would just build on, and Rebecca alluded to this, but when infants are developing, what they need from us is literally like tiny infants like need our physical bodies, right? They need us to cuddle them. They need to feel our heartbeat. They need to feel our touch. They need us when they look at us, they need us to look back, serve and return. There's all of these things that literally build a baby's brains, which is quite physical, tactical, talking, singing, all of that stuff, pointing, responding to them. That's not what we do in adolescence. Adolescence discussion is what builds teenagers' brains. And so we don't have to be, Socratic experts to be having conversations with our kids. We need to know what they care about. Go find out a little bit about that. You prepare for a meeting at work, your kid's super interested in skateboarding, spend 15 minutes on YouTube or on Google or ChatGPT asking about skateboarders, and then ask that question. Is it true that guy did this thing? Oh my God, that's amazing. Like they're going to be like, whoa, where'd you come from? That's your connection point. That's your leaning into their interests. And Rebecca also alluded to this, talk about the content of school. This one really surprised me because I thought it was too tiger momish. Like, what are you doing? What are you learning? And, did you dissect a frog today? But like, you're validating what they're doing in school by being interested, by asking intelligent, instead of asking the big broad, how was your day? Fine. You get to ask a bad question. You typically get a bad answer. Ask a better question, right? Like, oh, I know you guys were doing cell division in biology. Like, did you know that when people have cancer, like their hair falls out and that's related to cell division? There's like little things, and ChatGPT is great for this. Like it can help. And the whole point isn't to like get it right and make sure they have more facts in their life. You're literally scaffolding their brain development. You are helping them build their brains by asking questions, open-ended questions, not closed. What did you get on the physics test? That's a closed-end question.
Right.
What was it that challenged you most? Or which unit did you like the most? Which was most compelling to you? Which do you think is related to, the fact that I just flooded the stove with frothy milk, whatever. So that discussion really is incredible. It sounds so basic, and it is so fundamental to building an adolescence, both sense of potential, but also their actual brains.
Yeah, and you make a very simple suggestion in the book that I love, to review their schedule before dinner. Just like look over their schedule. Oh, how was this class today? And what are you talking about?
Right.
And my son is learning right now about Democratic Republicans. And I'm like, isn't it interesting how similar the issues that we're dealing with, states' rights versus federal, and people feeling about that? And I mean, believe me, he's not like, yes, mother, what an insight. Let's chat about it more. He's like, wrong, whatever. But it's the ability to kind of model that excitement about the learning too, that seems really crucial.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would add one thing to what you and Jenny just said, which is one of my favorite tactics is the teach me. I don't remember teach me, because sometimes I don't have time to look it up on ChatGPT, but asking about the actual class, because they don't have science every day necessarily, right? So, you had science today. Are you, how does it work, cell division? Like kids love to teach parents because they know more. And then you brought up, Margaret, one of the most important things is this idea of modeling the thrill of learning. When you're interested in something, talk about it. Like, oh, this is so cool. I learned this. This is how it works. I didn't know that. Even if they're not interested or tuning you out, they will start seeing that love of learning.
Yeah, that excitement.
I just had this. We went to a talk at one of my daughter's schools, and I raised my hand, and it was about space. It's this very kind of like wonky space talk. And my daughter looked at me, she's like, Mom, you don't know anything about space. What are you going to ask? And I was like, if I don't know anything about it, it's all the more reason to ask, isn't it? But in her mind, if it wasn't going to be a really good question, I shouldn't be asking a question. And I was like, it's okay to ask a dumb question. He's the expert. I'm the novice. Totally fine. And, I get it. She's 16. So this was like, and all of her friends.
Everything you do is horribly cringe, of course.
Totally. I am so cringe. And afterwards, I got hey, Mom, that was kind of a baddie question. Right. So, but like that in the moment, I could have been like, oh, I'm not going to ask a question, embarrass her, or, and I just said, like, when you don't know something, you can ask. It's okay. Like, people love to feel smart and to help you learn things. And so it's just those small moments of like modeling curiosity, modeling vulnerability, modeling like what it is to be a learner in the world. Like, we love these people, right? People who just want to know more and aren't so certain of everything. Like, that is it's in short supply these days.
Yes.
And one very practical tip that Jenny and I have tested all these on our own children.
Our kids hate this book.
Many of the tips are not in the book because they did not work on our own children. But one that I often use is start with the class that they're most excited about. So, I can tell when my kid has been in explore mode in school because they will come home. One of them will come home and will be like, unprompted, oh my God, we made a volcano in school. Like, you have no idea. Like, I had to get the thing. I was the builder, my partner, did you know, Mom, that and it's just like bubbling out of them unprompted. And that is such a different experience than most parents have with their kids when they come back from school. Sometimes they're like, meh, nah, wasn't
Fine.
that exciting, but you can really see. And so instead of asking about the class that they struggle with the most first,
which is our instinct. Yeah.
Of course you're going to do that because you want to,
by the way, from a place of love.
You want to help them. You're like, how'd it go? The math test. I'm so worried about anxiety, like, oh, hey, what was going on? Are you still doing volcanoes and science? Like, just start with something they like first. And then that paves the way for seeing if they need a little
remind them of the good stuff
in math.
I have been talking to Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop. They are the authors of the new book, The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better. And every one of these modes has specific solutions and ways to engage with different modes of learning and different modes of the teens who may be living under your roof. So we didn't even get to so many of the solutions in this book. I urge you to check it out, The Disengaged Teen. And Rebecca and Jenny, tell us where, it's 2024, people know how to find a book at this point, but tell us where they can find the book and where they can find more of your work.
You can go to the disengagedteen.com to stay in touch with us.
And we link to a bunch of independent booksellers if you would like to go that route, or you can buy it from the very, very big bookstores as well.
And we will, of course, link to Jenny and Rebecca's work in the show notes, and also our bookshop where you can get the book from an independent seller. Rebecca and Jenny, this could have been a 5-hour conversation. I knew when I read the book, I was like, this could be a really long one, but I really enjoyed talking to you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much
for having us.